My name is Loa. I'm 61 years old. That charm. I have been a widow for more than a decade, and the mother of an only child. I worked all my life as a secretary in a law firm in Rochester. And even with little, I never missed anything at home. It was with this salary that I paid for his college, that I bought his first car, that I covered the debts when he separated. I did everything myself, without ever charging anything in return. But today, I ask you, what makes a son raise his hand to his own mother? Just because the soup was out of salt? Maybe you've come here trying to understand how something like this can happen. And I understand. I wouldn't believe it either if I hadn't lived. But there are things that only those who have been through it know. The way violence starts small, disguised, until it becomes routine. Silence becomes shelter, and we disappear into our own homes. In this video, I'm going to tell you everything, from the first look of contempt until the day my son hit me in the kitchen. But, God, more important than that, I'll show you what I did next. And it was not what he expected, because what starts with a soup on can say, it can end with justice. But before we dive into the heart of this story, I need you to know something. Nothing, absolutely nothing, prepared me for what happened that night. I bled on my own kitchen floor from soup, and even with my face burning, my body trembling, and my soul bruised, I stood up, not with my fists, but with a silence he never understood, because what started there, it ended in a courtroom, with my son in handcuffs, and the whole town watching me. But this, of course, he never imagined, and maybe not even you either. So, if this story has already moved you right from the start, if it somehow reminded you of something you yourself have experienced or seen happen to someone, I ask you to stay here with me. Leave your like, subscribe to the channel, follow me. I don't tell this for exposure. I tell it because I know that there are a lot of people suffering in silence, as I did. Sometimes, all we need is someone who understands. So it is. Listen to me. Because now, I'm going to tell you what I've never told anyone. When Ethan returned home, it seemed that time had taken a full turn just to give me back my boy. He arrived with his suitcases, heavy shoulders and sunken eyes of someone who lost everything. His marriage had ended in ugly, scandalous fashion, and he had been fired from the bank where he worked in Manhattan. Even so, when I saw him standing there in the doorway with that face of a lost boy, now all I could feel was tenderness. It was my son. No, true, and a mother who is a mother, even tired, still tries to prepare a nest. He said it would be temporary, just a few months until it gets organized. I believed it. I prepared his room like in the old days, with sheets washed in coconut soap and the blue blanket he wore when he was a teenager. I made pancakes the next day, just as he liked it. I started getting up earlier, just to get the coffee ready. And before lunch I had ironed her clothes, arranged the papers, tidied up the bathroom. I wanted him to feel at peace. I wanted him to remember what we were before life turned to stone. In the first days, he even thanked him. He said he didn't know how he would have endured everything without me. What? And that gave me a damn relief, because I also needed to feel useful. I needed someone to take care of. After I became a widow, my routine was too quiet, and now, having an extra plate on the table, Wandoko Kostai, a noise upstairs, the sound of the door opening, all of it gave me the feeling of a living home. But it didn't take long. The sweet words began to become demands. First, they were the small things. Mom, can you take the clothes out of the machine? Or did you see where I left my jacket? Then came the harshest comments. This food is tasteless. You don't need to spend on these stupid flowers in the living room anymore. Let me settle your bills. You're starting to forget things. I laughed at first. I thought it was stress or tiredness. But the truth is that I no longer recognized the way he spoke to me. He started to fiddle with my medicines, hide the mail, and one day he showed up with a folder full of documents. He said he was going to take care of my retirement, because I was already at an age to get confused. And I, silly one, I'd let him. I signed everything without reading it properly, because he was my son, because I trusted. That's when everything really started to change. My pension, which I used to pay the bills of the house, started to fall directly into his account. He said that it was easier. That way he organized his finances better. But the markets started to come lacking something. The electricity bill was delayed now, and I realized that I no longer had control over anything. The kitchen, which has always been my temple, became his territory. No, he complained about the smell of the food, the spices. One day he threw away a pot that I had been using for 20 years, saying that it was old stuff for poor people. I started to prepare simpler, more neutral meals, so I wouldn't hear complaints. And yet, it was as if everything I did was wrong. There was a morning that marked me a lot. I was on the porch, Ember tried to ring, and he came out shouting, "Ha! You're not old enough to be fiddling with a needle. Mom, you're going to cut yourself, and then it's up to me to take you to the hospital." I swallowed that hard, like someone who drinks cold water in the cold. Now, I stood there, looking at the embroidery on my lap, and wondering at what point my boy had become this impatient man. Gradually, I realized that I was no longer the owner of that house. I was just a useful presence, an employee without a salary. I washed, down, ironed, sailed, ironed, cooked, and he still heard that he did everything wrong. Even so, I still believed it was a phase, that he was going to get better, that it was just a bad tide. But there's one thing we learn over time. When we cancel ourselves out too much, we become invisible, even to those who should love us. And I wanted to pause now, just for a minute, to ask you something from the bottom of my heart. Have you ever felt this way too? As if the love you gave had become a debt? As if everything you did was worth nothing? If you've experienced something similar, comment below. And they said, then the quantum. Right, I've lived it or it touched me, because sometimes just knowing that we are not alone, the pain weighs a little less. Returning to that house, the room was left without my flowers. The picture frames are gone. Gone. He said that it was tacky stuff. He forbade me to light a candle to pray. No. He said it was superstition. And when a new girl arrived in his life, Savannah, Nasoyerdihel, Dimomseum, Iron touched her. Everything got worse. She treated me politely, but always with that smile at the corner of her mouth, as if he were analyzing me, as if I were a nuisance, an old piece of furniture taking up space. Even so, I remained silent, because a mother's love is stupid. We wait. We think it will go back to the way it was before, but it never comes back. And it was exactly on one of those nights when I dragged myself through the kitchen, trying to do everything right, that everything collapsed. But do you want to know what happened to this soup without salt? And what did he have the courage to do with me at that dinner? I'll tell you. But not now, because what happened that night, no one, not even him, would ever forget it. That night, the soup was just the trigger. Things had been turning sour inside that house for a long time, but I pretended I didn't see it. Ethan had become a master at saying everything with a smile on his face. She began by complaining about the food, saying that it was always the same, or that my hand was no longer the same as before. Then he complained about the smell of the house, said it had the smell of old, and exchanged all the flavorings I used for industrial, cold, soulless smells. Even my crocheted quilt, made stitch by stitch with affection. He said it looked like asylum carpet. That cut me off. And the worst thing is that he didn't scream. He spoke softly, almost laughing, as if he were making a joke, as if the problem was that I didn't know how to accept a joke. One day, I came back from the market. I like to walk. It was my only moment on the street, and he was waiting for me at the gate. He said I couldn't go out alone anymore, that it was dangerous, that I could fall, that I was being forgotten. I took the key out of the bag. Town. But he had already changed the lock. He said that it was for safety. From then on, she only left when he let her. He kept track of my schedules, asked where I was every 10 minutes, and started putting away my phone at night, saying that I could be fooled by scammers. I was cringing, keeping quiet, because I still wanted to believe that it was care, not control. There was a Sunday when he called me to talk. He said that he had reviewed the house bills and that my credit card was a risk, that I was too generous and could end up being robbed. He asked me to hand over the card. No. I hesitated. He took it from my hand. And that's when I realized it was no longer a request. It was order. Ethan no longer saw me as a mother. I was a number. An expense. An object that he needed to manage. Worst of all, he still managed to turn everything against me. Don't you trust me, Mom? Or do you think I was going to harm you? And I, an idiot, just shook my head and said no, that I trusted. Yes, As Savannah started showing up more often, things got worse. She was one of those women who doesn't need to say anything for you to feel out of place. Young, elegant, nécessaire, diasham, fragrant to the core. I don't know what she saw in Ethan, but it was clear that she didn't like my presence. The two had a complicity that excluded me. They laughed at things I didn't understand. They whispered in the kitchen as if I were any other maid. One day, one tie, I went to get a cup from the cupboard and she said, "I how'd an old some." "Oh, sorry, Lois. I thought you had already gone to the bedroom. I lived there, but they spoke as if I were a visitor. The dinner I never forgot was on a Saturday night. Ethan called Savannah and two of her friends. I cooked all day, wanting to please, wanting to show that it was still useful. I prepared everything neatly. Roast chicken, all. Vegetables, wild. An apple pie like old times. Ethan came home from the market with an expensive wine and told me to leave the room. He said that they wanted to talk about young people. I stayed in the kitchen. Ran the kite, nilbies, listening to laughter and toasts. When they finally called me to bring dessert, he introduced me. "That's my mother, Listionatus, a retired lady that I take care of with a lot of love." I was hard. That was a stab in the back. Who took care of him all his life, was now his social project. Savannah smiled with her lips, but her eyes said something else. Contempt. I took the pie with trembling hands. One of the friends asked if I still cooked alone. Michelle, as if I were an invalid. Ethan replied over the top. Why, say would say. She insists, right? But we always take a look later. Like a silly kid. I felt my face burn. Wow, that wasn't my son. It was a stranger using my home, my history, new ways, and rewriting everything as if I were just a burden. When I went to wash the dishes, I heard Savannah quietly saying that the house needed an urgent renovation. "This place looks like an old movie set," she said. "Ah." Ethan laughed, and he added, "Mein Tom, Maude, walk into the box station. When it's mine, it'll change everything." "My, he said mine. That was the home I built, brick by brick, with my work, with my sacrifices. But for him, I was already just a phase that needed to pass. That night, I cried in my room. In silence, as always, because it wasn't just sadness. It was a feeling of disappearing, even though I was still alive. And once again, Hein. I did what I always did. I kept quiet, but something inside me started to crack. A small, almost imperceptible crack. But it was there. And this is where I ask you, Mundam, and this is where I ask you, have you ever felt this way? Have you ever felt that your presence bothers you inside your own home? That little by little, they are erasing you, as if it were natural. Because if you have, Then maybe you understand why. Days later, a simple bowl of soup changed everything. But what exactly happened that night? You only know if you stay with me, because the next part, my God, it still pains me to remember. It happened on any given Tuesday. One of those gray nights when the wind enters through the cracks in the kitchen window, and we just want to do something warm to warm our body and soul. Then I said you talk. It's on a self-care. I prepared a vegetable soup, as I had been doing for years. Carrots, potatoes, celery, a touch of nutmeg, simple but made with care. Ethan hadn't gotten home from work yet, and Savannah told her she was coming to dinner too. I set the table with clean napkins, turned on the yellow light in the room to make the environment cozier. I even remember the smell, a smell of home. That would soon be tainted by something I never imagined living. Ethan walked through the door with stiff steps. He was wearing a suit, his tie loose, his face tense. He didn't even greet me. He threw the briefcase on the couch and went straight to the table. Savannah arrived soon after, with her cell phone in her hand and her eyes hurried. I served them both with affection. As always, I made your favorite soup, I said. Home. He took the first spoonful and was silent for 2 seconds. I noticed the silence. It was the kind of silence that comes before the storm. Then he blurted out, "My, once you do not secret out, there's no salt. Mom, has you. Why are you serving me this here? Why do you want me to get sick?" Before I could answer, he stood up sharply, picked up the bowl with both hands, and threw it hard in my direction. I didn't have time to dodge. The impact of the porcelain on my face made a dry pop. I felt the cut at the time. Hot, burned. A trickle of blood ran down my cheek and dripped onto the floor. Savannah didn't say a word. He only widened his eyes and took a step back, as if it wasn't with her. No. I tried to get up, Leon. But Ethan came up. "You do everything wrong. Everything," he shouted. He pushed me against the closet. I tapped my shoulder hard. You can't. I felt the impact down my spine. Then he put his hand to my face as if he were going to ward off a fly, but it was a slap. A dry slap. Hard. As if I were not a person. I fell to the ground with my hands protecting my head. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, quiet, with my blood flowing and my heart beating so loudly that it seemed to echo off the walls. Savannah went to the living room. He took his bag and walked out the front door without looking at me. Ethan was still huffing, but then he went upstairs and slammed the bedroom door. Everything was silent. The house, that house that I bought with so much effort, now spat me on the ground as if I were an intruder. I sat on the tiled floor of the kitchen. The soup dripped from the wall. My glasses were crooked. The smell of vegetables turned into a sickening smell of violence. And I could only think of one thing. That was no longer just sadness. It was something else. It was a slow death, a loss of the name, the face, the history. I looked at my hands. They trembled. No, but not out of fear, out of shame. How did I get there? How did I allow my son to become that? And more than that, did I somehow help create that monster? Does too much love also destroy? I slept that night on the sofa in the living room. I didn't clean the cut. I didn't clean up the mess. I didn't turn off the light. I stood there, staring at the ceiling. Wow, Hastio, I did not, waiting for sleep to take me anywhere other than that. But a part of me woke up right there, and when I really woke up, I was no longer the same Lois, because what I did the next day, no one could ever imagine, not even him. Do you want to know what it was? So follow me, because the wound on my face healed, but the one that opened inside me became something that he will never be able to erase. I woke up with the dim light of dawn coming in through the crack in the curtain. His face burned. Wow. When I got up from the couch and went to the bathroom mirror, I almost didn't recognize myself. A deep cut on the cheek, the eye swollen. Now, the mouth with a purple that spread like spilled paint. For a moment, now, I ran out of breath to look at that and know that it was my own son who did it. It's a pain that has no name. Still, now, Tikon, why, Akanon so. I took a deep breath, washed my face with cold water, and went to the kitchen. I prepared the coffee. I set the table. I made pancakes, as I did on happy Sundays before. I forced myself to walk straight, not to moan in pain, to pretend that it was all just a nightmare, because at 8 in the morning, Savannah would arrive with friends for such a brunch, and I didn't want any of them to see what my life had become. When Ethan came down, he didn't even look me in the eye. She placed a little box on the table with a makeup base inside. Pass it on, Mom. It's very visible. Why? And he left, as if he was doing me a favor, as if the problem was the purple and not what caused it. I went to the bathroom again and, shivering, spread that expensive cream over the marked skin. Down. The base burned, and the tears flowed with it. But it did. How one town, Sigurdsenter high, continue, hid, hands, erased. At 9 o'clock sharp, Savannah arrived. She brought 3 friends, all well dressed, blue, full of sweet perfume and easy laughter. One of them carried a sourdough bread, as if it were a trophy. The other brought organic juice in a decorated glass. And the third was Evelyn, my sister. Amdio Leonamar. I hadn't seen Evelyn in years. We had moved away after our mother's death. She went to live in Maine. I stayed in Rochester. Cards at Christmas, 1 or 2 calls on birthdays, and there she was, walking through the front door of my house as a guest of my son's new girlfriend. When our eyes met, I felt the ground sway. She smiled. But frowned at the same moment, as if he had seen more than he should. As if he felt what I was hiding. I went to her, my heart pounding in my chest. Evelyn? How? How long? She hugged me slowly. Loie, now. You're different. No. I smiled. Lied. When now? It's age, right? But she didn't believe it. Her eyes scanned me like someone looking for a crack in an old wall. I deviated. Now, went to serve the coffee. Now, distribute the bread. Clean the invisible crumbs from the table. Why, us, until me was awkward. No, now. Throughout brunch, I was on my feet. As a maid. Well, like Shadow, they laughed out loud, talked about travel, spas, decoration trends. Ethan made jokes, told stories that placed him as an exemplary son, taking care of his elderly mother. And me, there, nearly smiling with my mouth cut inside. With each bite, I also swallowed the humiliation. Ethan gave me a sharp look as I bent down to pick up a cup that had fallen. It was at that moment that I heard his whisper, "You be quiet, or go to the street." He didn't speak louder than that, just enough to freeze me. Evelyn listened. Not the phrase, but the tone. And in that second, oh, she knew. He didn't ask anything. He just rested his hand on mine. Why, very lightly. Wow. And I felt the warmth of the only true presence in that icy room. After they all left, Ethan walked past me and said, "See how smooth it was? You just have to know how to behave." I closed my eyes. I took a deep breath. And I thought, "No, it's not just about me anymore." Now, he uses me as a showcase, as an example of domestication. That's it. I wasn't going to allow it anymore. And look, I'm here, opening my heart, telling my story without hiding the ugly parts. If you're still with me, listening to all this, leave a like on this video and subscribe to the channel. I still have a lot to tell you, things that may I won't. Until today, I never had the courage to say out loud. But now, Brandy, now it's different, because the truth is asking to leave. And I promise shall still surprise. That evening, while washing the glasses of juice, I realized for the first time that what held me back was not age. It was the fault, and it had to end. But I had to get out of a prison that no one sees. What if I told you that the key to this cell was much closer than I imagined? After that brunch was over, I was alone in the kitchen, collecting dirty dishes and leftovers of conversation in the air. The laughter still echoed in the corners of the room, but the whole house felt heavier than before. I wondered how Evelyn had ended up there, precisely on that day, precisely on that morning when I was still bleeding inside. Deep down, I knew life has these things. It sends a signal when we are about to sink for good. And Evelyn was mine. While washing the dishes, she entered slowly through the back door, as if coming back just to get her bag. But she stayed for a few seconds, looking at me in silence. "Lois, are you sure everything is okay?" she asked in a low, careful voice. I kept rubbing the platter, feigned surprise. "Sure. Why wouldn't I be?" She forced a smile, but the look didn't match. "You're different." And before I could say anything, Ethan appeared in the hallway. "Is everything okay around here?" he said. In that tone that feigns kindness, but carries venom. Evelyn picked up her bag, hugged me quickly, and whispered in my ear, "If you need anything, Look for me. I'm here. Please sit down. And he left. I was paralyzed for a few seconds, the dishcloth in my wet hands. After everyone was gone, I went to tidy up the guest room, and when I folded the quilt of the armchair where Evelyn had sat, I found a small piece of paper folded between the folds. A ticket? No. Her number, piece, with the firm handwriting that I remembered well, and a phrase written in such a simple way, but that felt like a hug. Call me if you need to. Anything. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I kept the paper in my apron pocket, as if hiding a sacred secret. That same night, almost 8 in the evening, the landline rang. Almost no one called that number anymore. Ethan and Savannah were in the room, watching some noisy series. I answered in the kitchen, Mom, my hand still shaking. Good night, Donna Lois. This is Adrian Turner. Now, I was an accountant at the firm where his son worked. Sorry for the time, but no. Would you have a moment to talk in person? It's about some financial transactions that made us worried. The voice was polite but firm. I froze. Movements. On whose account? I asked. In yours. But I can only explain it properly. Personally. Can you meet me tomorrow? Away from home? I was speechless. I looked at the room. Ethan laughed out loud. No, as if life was light. I hung up, saying that I would return the next day. I sat at the kitchen table, with my hand on my chest. That was it. The fear that I always pushed with the tea towel, with the salt in the pan, with silence. The fear that it wasn't just rudeness. If it weren't just contempt. Ethan was messing with things I didn't even understand. And I used my name. For the first time in a long time, I felt something other than pain. It was anger. It was a kind of internal heat, a kindling, a spark. What if all that I endured in silence was only the visible part? What if he was using me for bigger, dirtier things? That would explain a lot. The control of the accounts, the exchange of the card, the blocking of the statements. I wasn't just a shadow. I was a shield. Now, a facade. That night, I kept Evelyn's note in the dresser drawer. What else? Along with an old portrait of my wedding. And I stood there staring at the wall, thinking, what if the time has come to stop pretending? Because maybe, just maybe, my sister didn't come for nothing, and that call from Adrian was not by chance either. Well, no. But if I decided to listen, if I decided to move, what else would I be about to discover? I woke up early the next day, even before the sun rose. I wore a turtleneck blouse to hide what the makeup could no longer handle. Ethan was still asleep, and Savannah had left early for the gym, as she always did. I grabbed my bag with sweaty hands and walked out the front door as if fleeing. I took the bus to the city center. She couldn't remember the last time she walked alone like this. No rush, no grocery list, no fear of leaving something on the fire. I walked 2 blocks to the glass building where Ethan's old office was located. Adrian was waiting for me at the reception. A middle-aged man, calm, with the eyes of someone who has seen a lot. We went up in silence to a small room on the second floor. He offered me coffee, which I declined, so, and then pulled out a leather briefcase, placed it on the table. I turned it to and opened it carefully. Donna Lois, I know this is not easy to hear, but you need to know. He pushed a bank statement in my direction. My name was there, in cold letters. Well, hi. Repeated movements, codes, deposits, transfers. Those $50,000 have passed through your account in the last 6 months. That's it. It was without your knowledge, right? I nodded slowly. The throat locked. His son, Ethan, used his name and his accounts to hide this money. He took it from the company. Yes. And now, if this is discovered through legal channels and you do not take a position, you can be considered an accomplice. My stomach became a hole. The chair felt harder, colder. What? But, nice. How could he? Whispered. Adrian closed the briefcase carefully, as if keeping a bomb. Unfortunately, this happens more than it should. He knew that the lady trusted, and he used that. I was silent. No, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. But what I felt at that moment, it was a mourning. A mourning for the son I thought I had one. Adrian waited. No. Do you want to file a complaint? We can help you with that. There is a way to protect your name. I looked out the window. Outside, the city remained the same. Cars, horns, people in a hurry. But inside me, something broke. No mine, and, see you. I need to think. He nodded. I am, of course. But don't delay too long. This can escalate. I thanked him, trembling. I left the room as if carrying his own coffin on his shoulders. On the sidewalk, I stood for long minutes. People were passing in a hurry, and I was there, once was, motionless, holding that truth as if holding broken glass. Ethan betrayed me, not only as a son, but as a woman, as a person, as a citizen. Oh, he stole my story, my name, my CPF, and he still slept under my roof, eating my food, looking at me as if I were the useless part of his life. You know, there are stories that we carry in silence, thinking they are small. No, until the day someone turns on a light and we see the size of the shadow. So, we can, if you're here listening to me, stay with me until the end, because what I found out after that, everything changed. I walked back home slowly, feeling the ground sway with each step. I entered the door as if returning from a funeral. Ethan was sitting in the living room, barefoot, watching television. He glanced at me and said, "It took a while, dear somehow." Where was it? I answered, with only one on the street. I went up to the bedroom. Took off my shoes calmly and sat on the edge of the bed. I put my hands in my lap and stayed there, quiet, but inside me. Something began to take shape. For the first time, no, no, I didn't cry. I thought, oh, for the first time in a long time, a decision was born within me. Small, dear, but firm. No, did he soon, because now it was no longer just hurt. It was a crime. No, and I knew too much. But would I have the courage to go all the way? Or would a mother's love still hold me by the throat? You will understand. Now to do it, hop don't understand. Because what did I do next? Not even he was prepared to see it. Ethan noticed. No, he didn't even need words. He felt in my silence that something had changed. It was the day after that visit to Adrian's office. I woke up, made coffee, Xiang, as always. But I didn't start a conversation. Why? I didn't ask him if he slept well. I didn't comment on the time. I just poured his cup and went back to cleaning the sink. He looked at me with a furrowed brow. You're weird. Well, I continued to wipe the countertop. He left yesterday and didn't say where he was going. Took. Who was I with? His voice was already venomous, trying to hook me. I went for a walk. I'll contest in Wosid, a Tuniziarishan. I replied, No, and I'm so called, Cochio, to town. Lie. And he knew. Ethan stood up slowly, as if prowling his prey. He passed me and entered my room without asking. When I heard the sound of the drawer opening, my heart raced. I ran after it and saw it. He had Adrian's card in his hand. Adrian Turner. Now, what chassis jailboat he would a tapinaching and look at and say on. Accountant. He read aloud as if spitting out the name. He stared at me with eyes of fury. What have you done? Mom? The question came out as an accusation. I just said, Mom, nothing. But that was enough for him to explode. Did you talk to him? Did you go digging into my past? Do you think you can expose me like that? After everything I've done for you? He trembled with rage. He threw the card on the floor, pushed me against the dresser. Ma, you're going to end up in a nursing home. You know, I can declare you incapable. Senile. How? I just... Crazy. All it takes is one signature. I stood still. Fear tried to scream inside me, but I didn't let it near. Warm. I just looked at him as I had never looked at him before, with pity, and Ethan felt it. He backed away, muttering insults as he left the room. You owe me everything. Remember that. But he didn't notice that the kitchen window was open, and the next-door neighbor, Clarice, was in the garden, as she always does, every morning, watering her violets. Clarice was a simple but attentive woman, and that afternoon, when I went to bring her an apple pie, as I sometimes did, she pulled me lightly by the arm and said, I put a little camera there in your kitchen, facing the stove. Just to be safe. I understood. So did she. She saw it. Not everything, but enough. And, needless to say, we sealed a pact. She looked me in the eye and said, You're not alone. I returned home with the pie. back in my hands, and a lump in my throat. I sat down at the table, and for the first time in years, I felt that maybe there was still someone who saw who I really was, and not what my son said about me. And there is a time in life when we realize that we have been invisible for too long, that if you don't raise your voice, no one will know that you're still inside. And sometimes, all we need is a neighbor who pays attention, a look that says, I see you. If you ever felt this too, this desire to disappear and, at the same time, to scream for someone to see you, comment here. I understand you, or I know how it is, because this feeling, we shouldn't carry it alone. In the following days, Ethan became different. Now, our Semokais and the more aggressive, more suspicious. He began to watch my steps, rummage through my cell phone, control what I bought. But inside, was no longer the same. I started to hide copies of documents, took pictures of old papers, wrote a letter by hand and kept it with Clarice, without saying the content. I was preparing. I didn't know how it would be, but I was sure of one thing. I was no longer going to die in silence inside that house. And what Clarice recorded on camera, it was just the beginning of the turnaround, because soon other people would see it, and then not even he, with all his screams, would be able to silence the truth. But do you want to know what she recorded? Oh, why? So just wait to see what's next, because even I trembled when I saw it with my own eyes. On the afternoon that Clarice called me to see the camera video, I went with soft legs, but a firm heart. We sat together on the old sofa in her house, and she put the notebook on her lap. Oh, it was a short file. Near in town, within Coutauson. Only 7 minutes. But 7 minutes were enough for me to see my son outside the screen. The way he spoke to me, the tone, the words, the way he threatened me while drinking coffee, as if it were normal. Now he sit in the down, upward on his side. Do you really think anyone will believe an old woman who barely remembers where she left the key? He would say. And there I was, quiet, sitting on the edge of my chair, with the tea towel on my lap, down, silent. You could see everything. The contempt, the control, down, the shadow, leash. When the video ended, I was so. Clarice looked at me with her eyes full of water. Lois, this here? No, this is a crime. I nodded slowly. It was no longer a matter of opinion. It was a fact. She was the one who called Evelyn. The next day, my sister showed up at home with the key to a rental car and a briefcase in her hands. You go with me. I made an appointment with a woman, with Brenda Carver. Well, prosecutor, now. She takes care of cases like yours. But it's now. Lois, today, I wanted to hesitate. I looked inside the house and saw Ethan sleeping on the couch, sneakers thrown on the floor. Remote control lying on his chest, and I thought, if it's not now, it will never be again. Was Prosecutor Brenda's office was in a small, inconspicuous building in the old center of Rochester. Well, it was a cozy room full of pasta with the smell of fresh coffee. Brenda was a black woman, in her mid-50s, with a direct look, bluntly, but with a sweetness that seemed to come from a place of understood pain. He listened to me from start to finish without interrupting. He asked me to tell everything. The aggression, the screams, the control of the money, the videos, even the visit to Adrian. As I spoke, my hands trembled, but my voice, no, she came out in one piece. For the first time, I told the story as it was, without softening, without protecting anyone. Brenda was silent for a few seconds after I finished. Then he said firmly, "Lois, you have proof, and more than that. Oh, you have the right to live in peace. He assaulted you. He stole it from you, and he used his identity to launder money. This is very serious. We can act. We can protect you, clear your name, and make sure it never comes near your home again. But, you're going to need to testify." My heart sank. Testify. To say out loud, in front of a judge. Lawyers, strangers, that my son has become my aggressor, that he broke me inside. That he doesn't love me, that you may never have loved. Brenda gave me 24 hours. It's up to you. But remember, every minute that passes, he continues to feel entitled. I left the office with Evelyn by my side. Manchab, and Caldenado to count on by my side, holding my arm. Niece. But I didn't even feel my feet touching the ground. Whoa, I was anesthetized, as if you were living someone else's life. That night, Ethan arrived late, smell of drink on his breath and impatience in walking. He slammed the door of my room without knocking. "Tomorrow morning, you come with me to the bank. Let's end this story once and for all." I asked what story. He replied, through gritted teeth, "The complaint, the disgrace you invented. Go there with me and say it was all a misunderstanding. If you don't, you know what happens." I looked into his eyes for a second, just a second, but within that second, I made a decision. I would pretend to accept it, because if he wanted to take me to the bank, he should take me, because he didn't know that the next day I would not be the one who would be sitting in front of the manager. And yes, he, before the law. But could I stand to see my own son handcuffed before me? Would my heart have the strength to watch the end of all that? I didn't know, but what I did that dawn, changed the course of everything, even my own soul. That morning, I couldn't close my eyes. I sat in the kitchen chair, right in front of the wall clock I bought when Ethan was still a boy. That ticking was the only living thing in that house. Apart from my heart, there are so which beat slowly. Mary talks, as if trying not to wake up the pain that lived in me. The street light came in strips through the blinds, and the cup of tea I brewed cooled next to the sink. There, one down, alone. I looked around my house as if it were the last time. 32 years living there. Each wall had a memory. The mark on the ruler I used to measure Ethan's height when he was 7 years old was still on the doorframe of the laundry room. The stain on the living room carpet. I tell you, from the day he spilled grape juice and said it was dragon's blood. The crooked frame of our first photo together after his dad left. It was just the two of us. It was always just the two of us. And I gave it all. Leon. Every penny. Every minute. Every hope. To the end. To see my own son treating me like a nuisance. An object. A shield to hide his dirt. But that night, something inside me changed. I didn't cry. I just took a deep breath. For the first time, I didn't ask myself where I went wrong. For the first time, I didn't blame myself. I stood up. Literally. I'm not an ordinary Sigma. At last junctures. I got up from my chair and opened the drawer where I kept the documents Adrienne had given me. Extracts, copies, vouchers. I also took the note that Evelyn left, the video saved on the USB stick that Clarice handed me, and put everything in a blue folder. Then I went to my room. I took a small suitcase, one of those on wheels, which I used on the last trip I took to Buffalo to visit a cousin. I put 2 changes of clothes, my old agenda, my identity card, and a photo. Only one, me and my father. One you case in front of the house where I grew up. Because in that moment, I needed to remember who I was before I was someone's mother. The sky began to clear. No. The shadows of the house were hiding with the dawn, as if they knew something was about to happen. Ethan was still asleep. I heard his heavy snoring from his room. I went to the door of mine and closed it slowly, without making a sound. In the kitchen? Wow, what is your caption? I left the blue folder on the table. And a ticket, just 3 words. I chose to live. At that moment, I felt no fear. He felt peace, because even knowing that what would come would be difficult, painful, noisy, maybe even irreversible. I was finally doing something for myself. For the woman who once dreamed, laughed, worked, believed. For the woman who was always silent, but never weak. And look, if this piece of my life can become a mirror or a hug for someone, help me carry it forward. Like and subscribe here to the channel. This makes more difference than you think, because sometimes all a woman needs to stand up is to know that someone, somewhere, still hears her voice. With my suitcase in hand and my heart steady, I crossed the street to Clarice's house. She was waiting for me at the door, with an expression that mixed fear and courage. We got in the car. She took me straight to District Attorney Brenda's office. And when I entered that room for the 2nd time, I was no longer the Lois who apologized for existing. I was different now. I was the woman who survived everything. And now I was ready to start again. But would the world believe a 61-year-old lady against a charming, well-spoken man, who knew how to manipulate even silence? Would Justice really be able to see beyond the facade? Right. I only found out on the day of the hearing, and it was there that everything changed. More than I ever imagined. When the clock in the living room struck 7 o'clock, I already had my coat buttoned up to my neck and my small suitcase next to me. Near the back door, the sound on the steel cut. The dawn light came timidly through the cracks, and even with my chest tightened, I breathed with a kind of steadiness I had never felt before. It was then that I heard his footsteps upstairs, heavy, impatient. Oh, in town. The sound of the bedroom door opening, the jingle of the phone being unlocked, and in his voice, that thick voice, with contempt disguised as power. She's going with me today. Yes, he will sign, even if it is dragged. No, he said it on the phone, laughing between sentences, as if he had already won. But little did he know that I was no longer the same woman as yesterday. I opened the back door slowly. Without making a sound. Clarice was waiting for me with the car running, her eyes attentive to the rear-view mirror. I entered without saying a word. She just nodded her head, and we followed. And we went down the east road, avoiding the main avenues. It was as if each street known now had another meaning. I passed through the neighborhoods where I played with Ethan when he was a child. The bakeries where we bought bread on Sundays. The squares that were once the scene of laughter. And even though my heart tightened with the memories, there was something new there. I was no longer tied to any of it. For the first time, I was leaving, not from the city, but from the guilt, the pain, the invisible prison he built around me. The cell phone vibrated in my lap. It was him. Where are you? Attend to this crap. Are you making a clown of me? Ishana. The message flashed like a red alert. Then another. You will regret it. Don't forget who's in charge here. And one more. If you went to that prosecutor, I swear he'll make you pay. But I didn't answer. I didn't need it anymore. I silenced the device and looked out the window. The world went on outside, as if nothing was happening. But inside me, a new path began to form. We arrived at the prosecutor's office at 8:20. Brenda was already waiting for me. This time, she didn't ask if I was sure. He just offered me a cup of tea and said, "Let's get started." I handed over the folder with the documents, the statements, Clarice's video, every piece of evidence I gathered in fear was now a stone in the foundation of my new life. Brenda read everything carefully and said, "Lois, from now on, your name will be removed from the investigations into the account used by Ethan." The complaint was formalized. Justice will act, and you're protected by law. Hearing that was like taking 1,000-kilogram armor off your back. I was no longer an accomplice. I was a survivor. And now I was a witness. At the end of the meeting, Brenda offered me a temporary address, a safe place where I could stay for the next few days. Clarice and Evelyn would help me with whatever I needed. I thanked him His voice breaking, not out of weakness, but because I understood there that I had never really been alone with Sue. Those women whom life gave me without warning were my shield, my temporary home. And at that moment, I thought of you who are listening to me now. Maybe you also felt a day when you had nowhere else to run. But listen to what I'm going to tell you from the heart. Sometimes courage comes when we stop asking permission to live in peace. Now, justice was on the move, the gear turning, and I won. Well, I knew that from then on, there would be no turning back. But what I didn't know yet was that Ethan's despair was just beginning. And when he found out where I was, then the game really turned. Want to know what he did? You won't believe it. Later that week, on a gray Rochester morning, the prosecution car pulled up quietly on the corner of my street. I was sitting in the back seat with Brenda next to me, and Clarice further ahead, silent but present. My eyes were shaking. I confess, even though I did everything right. Even with the law in my favor, the body still carried the fear of years. The fear that, now, at the last second, everything would fall apart again. Brenda put her hand on mine and said, without looking at me, "It's going to end today." And I wanted to believe it. The police officers parked 2 vehicles in front of my old house. I still remember the feeling of seeing that image. My house, with the garden I planted little by little, now surrounded by men in uniform. Ethan was inside. He had no idea what awaited him. One of them rang the bell. Another was through the back. When he showed up at the door, barefoot, with his shirt crumpled and his hair messy. It took him a few seconds to understand what was happening. "Mr. Ryan." "Ethan Miller?" the officer asked. "We have an arrest warrant for bank fraud, domestic assault, misuse of identity, and money laundering." His look changed. It was empty. Then, furious, he screamed, pushed one of the policemen, tried to run along the side, but was surrounded. She tried to break his cell phone at the corner of the stairs. He spat on the floor, cursed us. He kicked the trash can on the porch. It was a cornered animal, but no one there was intimidated. He was handcuffed right there, in front of the entire neighborhood. I didn't get out of the car. I just watched through the window. Clarice shook my hand and, for the first time, I cried. But it wasn't a cry of pain. Was a regret, because that image of my son being taken away by the police, handcuffed, screaming like a stranger, this image will live with me until the end. I didn't want that. I never wished, but I had to, because it was the only to survive. Ethan destroyed me in so many ways I can't even count. But that morning, for the first time in decades, he couldn't touch me. Savannah appeared shortly after, barefoot, her hair tied up in a messy bun and a shocked expression. when I learned about the accusations. The account in her name used to move dirty money, the money missing from her card. It collapsed. He sat on the sidewalk with his hands on his head, swaying from side to side. Oh, I didn't feel a grudge against her. Oh no. It was also used, manipulated. Oh, and deep down, maybe I had realized it before, but he preferred not to see it, as I myself did for so many years. And it was there, in that car, stopped on the corner, that I realized the story of my life had changed direction. I didn't know what came next, but the cycle that bound me had been broken. Ethan would be judged like any other. Mundinon, Hidzamarsikata, Stereokat. His name was tarnished, not mine. The house was now just a building. No, the home, National Calm, a Diadisironam, a Dedizakopticres. I would have to build again, brick by brick. Inside me, how funny how some images are stuck in our memory as if time did not pass. That half-open gate, the sound of the policeman reading his rights, the final scream he gave before disappearing in the car. All of this remained like an invisible tattoo on the chest. And you're the one listening to me there? Have you ever been through a scene like this? A memory that you carry deep in your soul and that never left you? Tell me in the comments. It can be just a me too, or I've seen that. Sometimes, just knowing that someone understands, we feel less alone. As the prosecution car circled the block, I looked one last out of my old balcony. There was still the rocking chair there. And I thought, how many times have I sat there, thinking my life was over? And in the end, it was just the beginning. But what I didn't know is that, even with Ethan imprisoned, one last card would still be played, one that he left hidden, one that almost destroyed everything. You will understand, because the next visit I received, it made me tremble like never before. Returning to that house was like entering a wake without a coffin. I knew what awaited me, but I didn't know it was going to hurt that much. Brenda came with me, along with 2 agents. Clarice, now, as always, did not let go of my hand. The front gate was ajar, creaking in the wind. And the tall grass was already beginning to swallow the path of stones that I had laid myself, one by one. In the summer of 98, Ethan had destroyed everything, but it wasn't just what you could see from the outside. The real destruction was inside. When I pushed the door, the same round, I felt the air still, heavy, as if the house had held its breath waiting for me. What I saw there took my breath away. The sofa was overturned, the cushions torn with a knife, the pictures in the room, the ones I painted in community art classes, were all broken, thrown on the floor. One of them, the one with a landscape of Lake Ontario, had a dirty footprint right in the middle. The curtains torn off, the empty bookshelves, Leon. He even broke my husband's old records, which I didn't even listen to anymore, but didn't have the courage to donate. I walked slowly, as if I were stepping on rubble. Nadion, And maybe that was it. Each step took me deeper into what I once called home. The kitchen. The kitchen. La Nacio. She was the heart of my home. It was there that everything happened. Birthdays, pancake mornings, soup nights. But now, the ground was covered with shards. The cabinets open, the crockery all broken. Merci, and so Angie. The cutlery scattered as if they had been thrown angrily. The stove was stained, the sink clogged, the table, which my father gave me when I got married, was broken in half, and on top of it, a bowl turned over with dried soup remains. The soup, the same, the last one, nearly last one. There, in the middle of that chaos, there was a piece of paper stuck to the refrigerator with a crooked magnet. It was one of the letters Ethan wrote to me when he was a child. Nami, Nami, you are my world. The crooked calligraphy, full of colored pencils all around. He must have been 6 years old. And now, you find. Now I held that letter with trembling fingers, between broken glass shards, broken furniture, and broken promises. And it was at that moment that I understood. Nay, Digilnahab, understood. That house was no longer mine. Not by the walls, not by the memories. It was the captivity where I survived for too long. Brenda took pictures of everything with her cell phone. We will attach it to the process. This is not just vandalism. It is a clear message. He wanted to erase you. Lois, I just nodded. I didn't cry. I couldn't. Because deep down, now catch this, when you got up there, something inside me. I already knew. When someone destroys the house where he was raised, he is not only breaking wood and glass, and spitting on the story you built with love. And that, it hurts more than any slap down. I went to my old room. The drawers were rummaged over, clothes cut off, perfumes spilled on the floor. My jewelry, few and simple, is gone. But what hurt me the most was seeing the torn photographs. The one when Ethan graduated, the one from Christmas 2001, with my mother still alive. The one in our first car, cut in half, as if he wanted to erase every smile we've ever had together. And maybe he really wanted to. Perhaps, deep down, he wanted to punish me for having said no for the first time. Clarice came in behind me and handed me a handkerchief. I was still silent. I looked through everything and said, he destroyed what was mine to try to prevent me from remembering who I was. But what's inside me, why, I'll never be able to break it. And at that moment, I knew I would not live there again. Not for a day. Wow. That house was no longer shelter. It was just a scenario of pain. And you know, there are things that we only understand when we see it up close. When he steps on the cracked ground, whoa. When he holds in his hand the letter that once made us smile and now cuts us. I know that you who are listening to me there must have some memory like that too. Some house, object, note, place, that is history in a way that no one else understands. If you want to share, Tell me here in the comments. It can be a single word, how, a small memory, but these memories, however harsh, are what keep us alive. And when we share, oh, they are no longer just pain. It becomes strength. I left that house without looking back. Brenda took me straight to the police station, where I signed the definitive term of removal. After that, Ethan could no longer get close to me, or 3 blocks away. The prosecutor assured that justice would remain firm, that he would answer for everything. But even with the law on my side, I knew that the worst was not over yet, because a week later, a letter arrived, and within it, an unexpected request, an emotional trap that almost made me turn back. Do you believe it? That's that. Wait to see what he wrote. The first time the phone rang, I was still staying at Evelyn's house. It was a silent Sunday, one of those in which time seems to go sideways. The number was unknown, but I knew who it was before I even answered. I didn't answer. The answering machine did its job. His voice, muffled by the cold walls of the prison, sounded strangely sweet. Mom, it's Ethan. I just wanted a converse. You don't need to answer me now. Just listen. The message continued with an almost childish tone. He would talk like he did when he was a boy and do something wrong, hoping that I would run my hand over his head and tell him that everything would be fine. For a moment, my heart wavered, but Brenda warned me, don't fall for it. Lois, this is just the beginning. And it was. The next day, another call, another message, only this time the tone was different. So it's like that. Did you give it to me? Do you think you'll come out of this clean? Do you think the world will be on your side when you know everything Uwe put me through? I held the phone tightly. His voice no longer caused that shiver of fear. It was more like an ancient echo, a shadow trying to project itself where there was no more light. Brenda listened with me. Again. She paused the messages, pointed out phrases, showed the cycles. This is classic. Alternation between emotional manipulation and threat, as trying to regain psychological control. But you're no longer vulnerable. Lois, you are the woman who broke the cycle. The messages continued for days. One, he said that he was reading the Bible and that God had shown him his mistakes. Another, me, that I would expose my entire life if I didn't withdraw the complaint. Then he returned to the sweet tone. I miss our soup, the one from childhood. Do you remember? And then came the blow. You broke our family. Mom, you. Oh, it was as if he threw nets trying to pull me back to the bottom. Only now, I knew how to swim. What's more, I knew where the surface was. They were difficult times. I'm not going to lie. With each message, a new lump formed in the throat. But I had Brenda, Clarice, Evelyn, okay, and I had myself for the first time in a long time. We listened to the messages. We analyzed. We recorded everything. But the hardest thing was the silence that came later. when the phone stopped ringing, and only that feeling remained. Wow, he was still trying to reach me. And me? I finally understood that I no longer needed to answer. The guilt. Ah, guilt is a treacherous animal. She doesn't scream. She doesn't knock on the door. She sits next to him on the couch and says, in a soft voice, "You're a mom, remember?" And I remembered. I remembered everything. Childbirth, of the first steps, of the fear he had of the dark, from the day he fell off his bike, and I stayed up all night watching his breathing. But he also remembered the harsh words, of the cold eyes, from the crack of the porcelain from the soup bowl hitting my face. And then, wow, the guilt was getting smaller. Why aren't you? Like a cracked mirror that no longer reflects properly. I started walking every day. Evelyn lent me an old sneaker of hers, and I discovered a small park near her house. At first, I walked slowly, aimlessly, but little by little, I felt something rearrange itself inside me. Each step was like a seam in my inner fabric. I thought about my life, the years I let slip through my fingers, the silences I endured, the words I never said, and I realized I was coming back to myself. One day, Evelyn brought me a box with old papers of mine. Inside, I had my recipe book, some letters from friends who had moved, even a diary from the 90s. I started to reread, as if looking for clues of a woman who was forgotten in some corner of time. And I found it. This Lois Town, the real Lois that he liked, lemon pie, that cried watching old movies, that he dreamed of visiting California. She was still there, hidden, no, but alive. That night, I sat on the porch with a cup of tea and thought out loud, okay, he still tries to dominate me. But he didn't notice that his voice no longer rules here. And it was true. I was no longer afraid of my son, not because he was in prison, but because I had finally freed myself. Now, I know, the decision was mine. Wow. Continue rebuilding my life or open the door to another trap. And if you think he gave up easily, wait until you know what arrived in the mail. Because inside that white envelope, with my name written by hand, came the cruelest lie of all. A lie dressed in love. And when I read those words, I felt the blood run cold. But this time, I didn't fall. I want to know what he had the courage to write? You won't believe it. The envelope arrived on a cloudy Friday, with the prison seal in the upper corner and my name written in a handwriting that I knew with my eyes closed. I wanted to tear it up before I even opened it. But something in me, perhaps the part I still wanted to understand, made me sit calmly on the porch and open it carefully. Inside, when I now, an extensive letter, almost 4 pages, and in the beginning, he would say, since you think you're holy, shared, let me remind you that you also have sin. I knew right away. He hadn't given up. Ethan had dug deep in the past, and this time, Ray It wasn't about aggression, nor money. Down, Sigurd down. It was about me, along with the letter. He attached copies of old documents from the time I worked at the law office of Mr. Mimort, Bellamy. Oh, back in Rochester. Nay, these were records of bonuses paid out of pocket, undeclared tips, copies of emails showing changes to files that I would have made to adjust deadlines. Little things, mistakes from a time when I could barely afford Ethan's daycare and still keep food on the table. He used it now as a threat. If I fall, you fall with me. He wrote, then my stomach turned. I felt as if all the years of struggle came back in the form of shame. I showed the documents to Brenda that same afternoon. She read everything in silence, with that calm that only she has. When he finished, well, he took off his glasses and looked at me steadily. That's not enough to hold you back, Lois, but I know it's enough to hurt you. And that's what he wanted. Oh, I nodded. But inside me, something was beginning to crumble. It was not fear of justice. It was fear of myself. Fear that everything I hid for so long was really enough to erase who I am. I remembered the times I stayed until after work, typing with one hand and holding Ethan, sleeping on my lap with the other. I remembered the times when I accepted unofficial bonuses, because the salary did not cover even half of the household expenses. They were mistakes. Yes, but they were mistakes I made trying to survive. That night, Evelyn saw me sitting in the dark of the room. I trembled again, but not from fear of him. It was an older fear, the one that lives inside us when shame visits. And it was she who said, with the wisdom that only an older sister has, you did what you could with what you had. And it's not an old mistake that erases the woman you are today. The next day, Brenda invited me to give an interview with the prosecution. Well, it was nothing official, just a video for the case file, with my full statement, and I went. But this time, no, I asked to do it differently. I sat there, in front of the camera, and he saw, in the same clothes I wore at Ethan's trial. And I said everything. I talked about the sleepless nights, the small choices I made to protect my son, the documents I signed without reading properly, the successes and the stumbles. I told him everything. For the first time, I told my story with the wrinkles and cracks. And when I finished, Mom, Brenda said to me, wow, that was the most honest testimony I've ever heard. It's strange how, now, sometimes we spend our whole lives trying to hide a mistake, and it is precisely he who frees us. Because there, and after assuming everything, I felt a lightness that I hadn't felt in a long time. Ethan had no more weapon against me, because what he used as ammunition, I turned into a testimony. He wanted to destroy me with my truth, but it was she who lifted me up. There are things that we live and keep, but maybe by telling, we help another heart to breathe. Like this video and sign up, and let's make this story reach those who need it. Because someone out there, right now, may be thinking that their mistake is the end. And Maybe you just need to hear that it's not. And as I took a deep breath, thinking that the storm had passed, another piece of news arrived. Ethan had made a deal with a lawyer, something that could put him on probation sooner than anticipated. Wow. And with that, he would return to Rochester. Would I be ready to face the world with him on the loose? Or was there still something missing for this cycle to really end? Because the worst had not yet been said, and it was about to come from the mouth of someone I never imagined. The room was full, but I could only see the lights. Those spotlights all on top of me reminded me of the lamp that was on Ethan's bedside when he was little. I lit it every night, even when he said he was too old to be afraid of the dark. And there, one time, I'd Captain, he said, in front of the microphones, the cameras, the watchful eyes of the reporters and residents of the city. I was the one who was chasing away the dark now. I didn't have a rehearsed speech. I only had what I carried inside my whole life. I started with the basics: my name, my age, my history. I spoke like someone who opens an old diary, page by page. I told him that I was an executive secretary for more than 30 years, that I raised my son alone after his father left, that I never lacked food or love or presence. But I also told them about the difficult days, of the bonuses received outside the payroll because the salary did not cover everything, of the mistakes I made. Yes, for lack of choice, for ignorance, for despair, and looking straight at the cameras, I said, Windio, my son tried to use these mistakes to shut me up, but he forgot one thing. I lived, and those who truly live also fail. I explained about the manipulation, not just soda, or assumed them soda shivo, about the years he controlled my money, my freedom, even my own home. I talked about soup night. No dramatizing, no shouting, only with the truth. Every word I uttered seemed to tear a weight off my chest. Now, and then I looked to the side, saw Clarice in the audience with teary eyes, and I understood. That story was not just mine. Prosecutor Brenda confirmed in front of everyone that I would not respond criminally, that my collaboration with the investigations had been essential, and that all the indications pointed to a pattern of financial and emotional exploitation of the elderly. Ethan, imprisoned there, Norsil, died smell Geotam, lost the last trump card he had. His blackmail had been destroyed, not by force, but by exposure. When we turn on the light, the monster doesn't disappear, but it stops having power. And, at that moment, Lingwood said, "Oh now, I'd said he said," looking at the serious faces of those women sitting in the front rows, many of them with white hair like mine. I understood that what I was doing there was not just personal justice. It was collective reparation. It was as if my pain was paving the way for other pains to come out of the shadows as well. On the way out of the press conference, a lady approached me. He must have been about 70. Maybe more. Maybe more. She held a small bag with both hands and looked at me as if she recognized me, even though she had never seen me. "Thank you, Lois," she said. You said what I never had the courage to. That dismantled me from the inside, but in a good way, because there are things that we keep thinking that no one else feels. And when he speaks, he discovers that many people were just waiting for a voice. You know, sometimes we think that aging is slowly erasing, but I learned that when we decide to tell the truth, even with a trembling voice, oh, we light it up, and it lights up the others too. And as much as that afternoon seemed like the end of a story, it wasn't, because an entities are careful sound. Days after the press conference, a new letter arrived. Only this time, it wasn't Ethan's. It was from someone I hadn't seen since before he was born. And what was written there? It turned over everything I thought I knew about the past. Because, after all, every story has its layers, and mine still hid one that I never had the courage to touch. Hitherto, I never imagined that, after so many years of pain and silence, someone would offer me a chance like this. Raphael Miller called me into his office in that high-rise building in Rochester, glass reflecting the gray sky of that autumn afternoon. He was serious, but there was sincerity in every word. Mrs. Lois Davis, he began. Wow. First of all, I want to acknowledge that Ethan's responsibility is mine as well. He was my employee, and we failed to stop these things from happening. But more than that, I want to acknowledge you, what you've built, your career, your dedication is unparalleled, Newt, and we need your expertise to reorganize our management team, review processes, and restore integrity to the company. I listened to every word as if I were on top of a mountain after years of storm. My heart was beating fast, but there was calm there, a quiet peace I hadn't felt in a long time. He continued, "Might have so calm, my terms of digoteur. In addition, as recognition for the inconvenience and suffering you have endured, I urge you to upward, our study is shown at a we want to offer compensation of $50,000. It's not charity, it's justice for what was taken from you." I couldn't breathe properly. $50,000, more than my accumulated retirement from years of work, and, above all, the recognition that Ethan never gave me. I felt that life finally gave me back something I would never ask for. Dignity. Raphael explained the position in detail. An administrative position where I would use every knowledge, every strategy learned over decades, without fear of being diminished, controlled, or manipulated. It was an invitation to take back control of my own story. I sat quietly, absorbing every word. As he watched patiently, I thought about the nights when I did laundry, prepared meals, organized the house as if it were my own office, and how all of this had been ignored, despised by Ethan, and even by Savannah. Now, all of a sudden, that old effort had value, not just financial, but moral. Raphael then smiled slightly and added, "We know that none of this erases what happened, but it is an opportunity for you to start over in every way. And that's when something inside me moved. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the position. It was the feeling of being recognized, that my life of work and sacrifice finally had weight, had a voice, had respect. I accepted. Well, of course, it was not an impulse. It was a silent decision that I felt I had made a long time ago, without even realizing it. When I left the building, I felt the cold wind hit my face, and for the first time in months, I breathed without fear. The city of Rochester, oh, which so often seemed small and stifling to me, now seemed full of possibilities. I could see my past, but I could also see the future, a clear and open road ahead. And deep in my chest, an old flame was lit, the certainty that no abuse, no humiliation, no betrayal could erase who I really am. This opportunity was more than work or money. It was freedom. But even as I smiled at the sky, a part of me knew there were still shadows in the way. Ethan was still in prison. There were still scores to settle. There were still promises of justice to be fulfilled. The feeling of victory was sweet, but I knew that the next chapter would require courage, intelligence, and patience. I could finally rebuild my life, but the question persisted. How quiet and insidious. How far would Ethan try to regain control? How far would the truth protect me? And where would I need to fight again? But now, with all the experience, all the maturity, and all the strength that life has given me, I felt at that moment that I was ready to find out. As I entered the courtroom on that gray morning, I felt a mixture of nervousness and a strange serenity. Ethan was there, sitting next to his lawyer, and for the first time since I became his victim, he didn't look like the predator controlling everything around him. His hunched shoulders, the defiant gaze that now trembled slightly, showed that he knew, even without admitting it, that this time he could neither manipulate nor deceive. Savannah was present, discreet, with a serious face and a rigid posture. And for the first time I saw her not as a silent accomplice, but as someone who finally saw the truth. I took a deep breath and sat down on the witness stand. I felt the weight of years of accumulated fear, humiliation, and abuse, but also a clarity I never thought I could feel. I was no longer afraid. When the judge called me, I stood up, walked with firm steps, feeling every fiber of my body wake up to a greater purpose. I took a deep breath, looking at Ethan. There was no anger in my eyes, just the firm conviction of someone who knows every detail of his own story and decided that the truth would prevail. I began to talk. Telling, not, told, accurately and calmly, about every aggression, every financial manipulation, every veiled threat he used to control me. The voice trembled only once in a while, not out of fear, but out of the memory of the nights of terror I had endured. I described the night of the saltless soup, the bruises I hid, the makeup I was forced to wear, and the silence that imprisoned me for so long. Each word was a piece of the construction of a picture that only I could reveal. Savannah was called next. She told about the discovery of the financial embezzlements and how Ethan used forged documents and my own bank account to try to escape justice. His words were firm and, for the first time, fearless. Clarice and Evelyn also testified, confirming every detail of the abuse, every threat, every gesture that showed Ethan's true face. The judge, an older but attentive man, listened to everything in silence, taking notes, observing each reaction. When Ethan's lawyer tried to argue, presenting excuses and justifications, he silenced her with authority. There was no more room for manipulation. The evidence, the recordings, the testimonies were incontestable. The judge paused, took a deep breath, and said, "Mr. Ethan Davis, in light of the seriousness of the charges and the continuing risk you pose to your mother and society, the application for bail is denied. The court determines that the defendant will remain in custody until the date of the trial, with no possibility of release." Ethan stood still for a moment. His eyes, once full of defiance, now reflected a mixture of pent-up anger and palpable fear. He breathed heavily, processing that the world he had been trying to control for years had finally turned against him. I felt no pleasure in seeing his defeat. I felt no revenge. I only felt the realization that every act, every choice, every violence has a consequence. The silence that hovered after the judge's decision was heavy, but liberating. For the first time, I could breathe without fear, walk without constantly looking back, live without the shadow of the one who hurt me hidden under the mask of a beloved child. As I left the courtroom, I felt a strange lightness in my shoulders, a sensation I hadn't felt in over 3 years. Ethan was not only in physical prison, he also lost control over me, over my life, over my dignity. With your calm, every threat, every manipulation, every physical and psychological blow finally had a limit imposed by justice. As I walked to the car, feeling the cold Rochester wind hit my face, I thought of all the elderly women who might be experiencing something similar, trapped in silence, victims of abuse, fear, and blackmail. I couldn't let my experience be my own alone. It was necessary to share. It was necessary to be an example that no matter how long someone tries to imprison us, there is always a way to recover one's life. But even with justice done, one question hammered through my mind. Would Ethan learn anything from this? Change? Would you recognize the damage you caused? Or would he continue to be trapped in his own pride and evil, unable to redeem himself? I didn't know yet, and maybe I never would. But what I knew for sure was that, for the first time in years, I was free to rebuild my life. Free to choose my steps, free to exist without fear of those who should love me above all else. And as I walked in silence, watching the courtroom walk away, I felt that every tear shed, every night of fear, and every moment of pain had finally been transformed into strength. I had lost submission, How? But I gained my own story back, and at that moment, a certainty hovered over me. Justice, even if late, Norma, Iron Sigoshaperson, always comes, and no violence, no abuse, no secret, no can remain hidden forever. Then, and as I prepared to face the next chapter of my life, a question whispered in my mind, unsettling and full of anticipation. And now, no, but what would it be like to rebuild everything that was lost and build something that was truly mine, the way I always dreamed? As the sun set over Rochester, I sat on the porch of my home, now restored with the care of Clarice, Evelyn, and a few supportive neighbors who understood the importance of every detail. Each corner, each object, each rearranged photograph told a new story, my story of a new beginning. Ethan was still trapped, facing the consequences of his actions, and Savannah had finally found her way to rebuild her own life away from his shadow. Brenda continued to accompany me at work, ensuring that my steps were safe and steady. I had started my new job, and each day I spent in the office, surrounded by people who respected my experience, reminded me that it's never too late to find purpose, recognition, and dignity. At night, with a cup of hot tea in my hands, I would look out over the silent street and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. There was no fear. There was no submission. Just a deep certainty that surviving and resisting had given me strength. I learned that a mother's love does not mean accepting violence, and that courage can flourish even after 60, when life seemed to offer only shadows. The past still existed in my memories, but no longer as a current. Now it was a lesson, experience, and fuel for my future. My future. I want every person who watches me today to understand that life is made of choices, and our dignity should never be negotiated. I thank you for walking with me in this story, for every minute of attention and empathy. If this story touched your heart, like the video, it's like a hug that warms and supports this channel. And subscribe, as if it were an invitation to come back to the next cafe, where we will share more real and deep stories. Let me know in the comments which city you're watching, so we can build this community of support and learning together. Don't forget to activate the bell. And see how. So you don't miss it when the coffee is brewed again. And don't go away yet. Listen to the next true story that will appear on the screen. Always remember, wiser now. Each wrinkle tells a story, and each story carries a strength. Watch the next video here on the channel with another incredible story. The freedom I won at the age of 61 was not just about escaping my son's violence. It was about finding my own voice, my autonomy, and the ability to live fully. Every day I wake up and feel the sun coming through the window of my house is a reminder that the future, once unthinkable, now exists, and I rebuild it, step by step, with the certainty that truth, patience, and courage always win. One look higher, leave on that sewage swerve, on the